This is my presentation for the 3 design aesthetic exploration assignment thing by Rowan. So the first aesthetic that I picked was surrealism, and here's a cat meme. So, surrealism, what is it? Surrealism is about the surreal. So, surrealist artists, as a movement, they blurred the lines between the dream and reality and explored repressed desires to expose deeper realms of the human psyche. Ooh. So they definitely had a lot of Freudian influence, seeking to access the unconscious mind, but spoiler alert, Freud actually didn't fuck with them. And it was art that was exploring the hidden layers of our minds, memories, dreams, and emotions. And it merged dreams and reality to create images that challenge our sense of possible, but at the same time staying psychologically coherent. And the last quote I pulled was, "It's a visual dreamscape where ordinary rules of reality no longer apply." Wow, it sounds interesting, doesn't it? I hope, because there's more. So surrealism was kind of a reaction against rationalism and realism, and it was kind of taking off as an art movement, especially post-World War I. So the art movement itself started as a literary and art movement in the 1920s. It definitely has hints of Dadaist and psychoanalysis influence kind of strung throughout it. And in the long run, it would lead to influences everywhere in art, whether it's film, photo, fashion, music, literature, etc. And here is Manifeste du surrealisme, which actually means Manifesto of Surrealism. I'm fluent in French, so. Freud moment. So Freud said, "I am not able to clarify for myself what surrealism is and what it wants." Yikers. So the guy that heavily influenced the aesthetic actually didn't mess with it, which isn't super relevant, but it was just kind of a funny little side rabbit hole I went down of stuff that I was researching. He just disliked and misunderstood kind of the whole movement and viewed surrealists' work as chaotic. He said that they were fools and fanatics. I assume fanatics of himself. Big ego, am I right? Freud. So, and he thought that they were not actually exploring the subconscious, and instead thought that they were just kind of allowing the ego to dictate imagery and paint their conscious. So basically said that they were doing the opposite of what they thought they were doing. And he also just was kind of pretentious. He preferred classical art. He thought avant-garde stuff was too chaotic for his little tame mind, and thought that surrealists should be treated with therapy. Harsh. Especially surrealist figurehead André Breton, which I found on Reddit. And that's a fun little side tangent of stuff. His beef with Breton was quite funny. So, called him a lot of messed up names. I don't approve. But regardless of whether unconscious should be explored through art or through therapy, Freud's technique of automatism was noted as a key direct application of Freud's theories. Automatism in physiology is bodily movements that are not consciously controlled, like breathing, sleepwalking, that kind of thing. And in Freud's whole psycho world, he was saying that it was a technique of free association and automatic drawing or writing to explore the unconscious mind. So he'd just have his patients like write stuff, and he'd be like, don't think about it, just start writing, and I guess he'd hope that they start drawing pictures of their moms or something. I didn't really get too deep into that side of it, but in the surrealist art movement, the dictation of thought in the absence of all control, exercised by reason and outside all moral or aesthetic concerns. That's what André Breton wrote in the Manifesto of Surrealism in 1924. So pretty much what Freud was saying to do, period, with painting and stuff. And I just thought all of that was funny context and somewhat relevant. Ah ha ha. For more, here's a YouTube video that I watched that I don't really remember as I'm recording it, but I think it was just about Freud and surrealism. So back to surrealism as a whole. Some of the most major artists, at least historically, in the movement post-World War I were Salvador Dali, René Magritte, Max Ernst, and Man Ray. So this is a piece by Magritte that was called Two Lovers. I just thought it was particularly cool and interesting, so I put it in the slideshow. It's two lovers, who would have thought? And they have a sheet draped over their heads, and I feel like it, I don't know, captures a lot of stuff around suffocation and kind of like blocking off yourself from someone else, particularly if you guys are lovers. I don't know, kind of interesting. This one was called, initially it was called something else, and then it was renamed to Triumph of Surrealism, which I just started going down another little research rabbit hole around, but that might be a separate thing. Anyways, it just is this surrealist monstrosity, monster guy that is triumphing, but in reality he's just kind of flailing around. So somewhat historically interesting and maybe significant, one might say. And then this is by Man Ray, different works by him. He was notable for a lot of reasons. I think he said he mostly considers himself a painter, but he was also the inventor of the rayograph, which he named after himself because he was like, it's a photogram and it's invented by me, so it's not just a photograph, it's a rayograph. And he used this light-sensitive paper and put stuff on it and then exposed it to light. So a lot of it was just objects, like there's like pictures of combs and stuff, not pictures, rayographs. Oh my God, I'm all over the place. With like combs and objects, pens, I think. And some of them look pretty interesting. So, insert title text, no, I refuse. So this is just different surrealist artists, but post-surrealist movement. I don't know if there's like a separate term for like modern surrealism or surrealism in film. But these are different things that I had heard of and liked before learning more about like the art movement post-World War I, and thought I'd include as like a notable trajectory of the vision. So this is The Holy Mountain by Jodorowsky. Sorry, haven't said his name in a second. Super weird movie. Maybe recommend, maybe I don't recommend. I don't know, it depends what kind of freaky shit you're into. But definitely captures the surreal concept, honestly, more potently, I'd say, than any of the other stuff I have here, maybe. Very weird. And then Eraserhead, Edward Scissorhands, which I put Edward Scissorhands small because I saw some stuff online classifying it as pop surrealism, which I'll get into later. But interesting distinctions about the different genres, especially as they evolved over time, and kind of classifying what really is surrealism as time went on. I'm just saying words. Here's Being John Malkovich, a movie about being John Malkovich. Here's Beau is Afraid and Mulholland Drive, which are both more recent surrealist movies. Yeah. Surrealism, more stuff. Looking back, you can kind of tell surrealism has some parallels with Dadaism, but it's kind of more psychoanalytical, more Freudian. It focused on accessing our dreams, our subconscious, less about the existential questions of meaning, bruh. And it had very lasting impacts on some very cool stuff. So experimental film throughout history, which I put on the last slide if you're interested, as well as all types of media, visuals, fiction stories, fashion, editorials. It shapes all types of modern culture, modern visual culture rather. And some artists that influenced me, who I think were probably influenced by surrealism or influenced by people who were influenced by surrealism. In music, Poppy, Magdalena Bay, Bjork, aka Twigs. Different directors, David Lynch, Rip, Dr. Seuss. And then in fashion, Ray Kawakubo, Elsa Schiaparelli, and Alexander McQueen, who all have some pretty sick stuff if you guys want to take a little peek ski. But here's a Magdalena Bay single cover art that they did last year that I felt pulled a lot from surrealism. I don't know who painted it. I probably should have looked that up. Here's some fashion by Ray, and then here's a Poppy album cover that is an ambient album that audibly is very surreal, and the cover I also think is cool and surreal. So in brief, for the actual stuff that the assignment wanted, 3 key characteristics of surrealism: dream brain, subconscious symbols, and uncanniness. 3 key characters were French poet André Breton, who launched the movement with his manifesto back in 24, and Spanish painter, printmaker, sculptor, writer, and filmmaker Salvador Domingo Felipe Jacinto Dali, and Belgian painter René Magritte. And I kind of skip over a lot of stuff about Dali in this because I assumed most people know the gist, but yeah. Okay. Oh, and this was the sources for surrealism stuff. So I think this was like Southern Australia Art Gallery, Milan Art Institute. They had some like definition quotes that I pulled for the aesthetic. And then this was a Reddit thing that I found that was talking about Freud stuff and automatism stuff and Surrealist Manifesto. So if anyone wants to check out those fun little readings for an afternoon, very interesting stuff. So